Hola mis amigos y bienvenidos a una lección sobre el subjuntivo en cláusulas adjetivales. We've been talking about the subjuntivo quite a bit lately, and maybe it's starting to sound a little repetitive. Maybe you're starting to think to yourself, wow, we keep hearing about emotion, doubt, influence, negativity. Is something going on here? So, for the sake of that repetition and review, let's look back just a bit and make sure we're all on the same page together. Bueno, primero, the original structure of the subjuntivo that we learned, maybe some of you learned it last semester actually, tells us that three things are necessary in order to use the subjuntivo. Can you remember what those things are? Those things that we need in order to be able to use the subjuntivo? Número uno, we need que in the sentence. You have to have que. You also have to have a change of subject. Cambio de sujeto. And we also learned that you need an expression of emotion, doubt, influence, or negativity, which I affectionately call edin. Those were the three things we originally needed in order to use the subjuntivo in a sentence. Then we graduated up to something a little more advanced in using the subjuntivo con conjunciones. And this is just a straight up memorization. We had to remember when we always use the subjunctive, and we learned the acronym ESCAPA in order to remember those expressions that always use subjuntivo. And then we also remembered happy to see the elephant, remember that, for the expressions that sometimes use the subjuntivo. And we learned that with the sometimes conjunctions, you use the subjunctive when you're dealing with unknowns or things that haven't happened yet, and you don't use the subjunctive if it's something that is a known, something that already happened, so there's no question mark about it. There's no doubt. And now we move on to another nuance of subjuntivo. It's not really new, but it's just a different perspective for me to point out to you at this point. And this part really focuses in on edin, the notion of emotion, doubt, influence, or negativity. So let's start with this question. Here's a question for you. ¿Conoces a alguien que viva en Malasia? Do you know anyone that lives in Malaysia? And notice that in my question, I use subjuntivo because I'm asking, do you know anyone that lives in Malaysia? It's not certain. I don't know the answer to the question yet. There's doubt about whether or not you know someone who lives in Malaysia, so I used subjuntivo. And now look how I go about answering. If my answer is negativo, no conozco a nadie que viva en Malasia. Again, I've used subjuntivo, and my justification for the subjunctive this time is the negativity. Since I'm being negative, I use subjunctive. No, I don't know anyone who lives in Malaysia. But the truth is that could change any time. If someone walks into the room who is from Malaysia and introduces herself to me, then the situation will have changed. So it's a negative, it's something that's doubtful because it could change. That's why it uses the subjuntivo. If I answer affirmatively, sí, conozco a alguien que vive en Malasia. Se llama Osvaldo. Yes, I know someone that lives in Malaysia. His name is Osvaldo. He's real. He exists. Note that there's no negativity in that sentence. There's no doubt or uncertainty. I really know someone that lives in Malaysia. And for that reason, I used vive in that affirmative sentence. No need for subjunctive because it is an indicative statement of fact. Osvaldo exists. Look at some more examples with this. Necesito el sobre que está encima del escritorio. ¿Puedes dármelo? I need the envelope that's on top of the desk. Can you give it to me? There's no doubt about that. The envelope really exists. I'm telling you, it's the one that's on top of the desk. So there's no subjunctive because it is an indicative statement of fact. However, look at the next example. Necesito un sobre que sea grande y blanco. I need an envelope that is big and white. I need this kind of envelope. It's unknown whether one exists. It's unknown whether I can even find one. So that's why I used subjuntivo, sea. Más ejemplos. Voy a la carnicería que está en la calle central. I'm going to the butcher shop that is on calle central. It is a real butcher shop that exists. I even know where it is. So there's no subjuntivo. I use the está, which is indicative. It's an indicative statement of fact. However, busco, I'm looking for, busco una carnicería que esté cerca de la casa de Juan. I'm looking for a butcher shop that is near Juan's house. I use subjunctive. I don't know if I'm going to find a butcher shop near Juan's house or not. This might be impossible. It's uncertain. It's unknown. Therefore, I use the subjuntivo. Bueno, más ejemplos. Quiero hablar con la señora alta que habla francés e italiano. I want to speak with the tall lady that speaks French and Italian. The tall lady. I know she exists. So there's no subjunctive. I use the indicativo, the presente del indicativo. But the next example, quiero hablar con alguien que hable japonés. I want to speak with someone that speaks Japanese. I don't know who this person really is. I don't know if such a person really exists. Therefore, subjuntivo. Más ejemplos. En mi barrio hay una casa grande con 5 alcobas y una piscina. In my neighborhood, there's a big house with 5 bedrooms and a swimming pool. This house really exists, so it's indicative. Contrast that with, los Rodríguez buscan una casa que tenga 5 alcobas y una piscina. The Rodriguezes are looking for a house that has 5 bedrooms and a swimming pool. They're looking for one that might have those attributes. They might not find one. One might not exist. One might not be for sale. We don't know what's going to happen. It's unknown, so it is subjuntivo. Okay? It's fun because in Spanish we're able to use the subjunctive mood to express ideas that we really can't express in English. Or at least in English we'd have to back up and explain ourselves with more explanation and more words, or perhaps even with our tone of voice. But the subjunctive mood gives us the opportunity in Spanish to express unknowns and doubts in a very intuitive, inherent kind of way in the sentence. And once you get comfortable with it and used to that notion of doubt and negativity, it's really kind of fun to know that you're expressing more in your sentences and in your expression. Bien, let's look at creating these questions then, formando la pregunta. ¿Hay un cajero automático que esté cerca del museo? Is there an ATM that is near the museum? Well, I don't know. There's doubt about it. If I didn't have a doubt about it, I wouldn't be asking this question, ¿verdad? So often you find that subjunctive gets used in these questions because there's doubt, therefore subjuntivo. So let's look at the ways to answer this question. The affirmative answer, sí, hay un cajero automático en el banco que está frente al museo, no te preocupes. Yes, there's an ATM at the bank that is across from the museum. Don't worry. There is an ATM there. It exists. I'm expressing certeza, certainty. That's why I used the present indicative of estar. Está. It really is across from the museum. However, look at the negativo. No hay ningún cajero automático que esté cerca del museo. I'm being negative, so I use subjuntivo. Okay? Esté is presente del subjuntivo. Negatividad. Vale, let's talk about a few more details with this, más detalles. Usamos a personal en español para indicar que la acción le ocurre a un ser vivo. And this is something I've been trying to point out to you more and more over time, that we have a personal in Spanish to show when action occurs to a living being. As in, veo a Marisela los lunes en la clase de biología. That a before Marisela shows that the seeing is happening to a living being, that Marisela is a living being. Invitamos a nuestros primos a la fiesta. This shows that our cousins are living beings. Y así es, a personal. And hopefully this is something that you've been seeing some examples of in your individual work too. The neat thing about a personal is that it's an attribute only of Spanish. It's not in any other Romance languages, which makes it kind of unique. And I think it really helps to clarify when we're talking about people and when we're talking about inanimate objects. So, when we don't use a personal, no usamos a personal con sujetos hipotéticos. So, honing in on just subjunctive and these subjunctive structures, we don't use a personal with a hypothetical subject, as in, necesito un asistente que sepa trabajar con la gente. It's an unknown, it's hypothetical, we don't use a personal. Busco un estudiante que quiera investigar tradiciones peruanas. I'm looking for a student that wants to research Peruvian traditions. We don't know if that person really exists. It's a hypothetical subject, so there's no a personal there. And by the way, clase, this isn't something that I want you stressing over or really burning the midnight oil on, but it's something to be paying more and more attention to over time and being aware and observant about. A little more with this, pero sí usamos a personal con sujetos específicos y alguien y nadie. So we do continue using a personal if it's a known or specific subject, and when we use alguien y nadie, as in, necesito al estudiante que sabe trabajar con la gente. Busco al estudiante que quiere investigar tradiciones peruanas. See the difference there? These people really exist. I need the student that knows how to work with people. I am looking for the student, he really exists, that wants to research Peruvian traditions. Buscamos a alguien que pueda llenar formularios para los hispanohablantes y no conozco a nadie que sepa Swahili. Bien. So when we use alguien and nadie, and when the subject is specific, we continue to use a personal. Bien, so I know you're excited to light in and get your feet wet with this. So here we have some practice sentences where you're going to fill in the proper form of the given infinitivo that is in parentheses. Think carefully about whether you're dealing with knowns or unknowns, doubt or certainty, affirmative or negative ideas. So push pause, take your time working through these, and you can check yourself on the next slide. Bien, here we go with our respuestas for those 8 review questions. You can push pause and really contemplate these. I've given you the correct answer as well as the justification. Note that if it's subjunctive, usually the justification is unknown or negative. And if it's indicative, the justification is that it's a known. It's something that exists. And those are really the underlying ideas behind indicative and subjunctive. And if you approach your subjunctive from that concept, you don't have to sit around and memorize a bunch of expressions and memorize the idea of, well, this is an indicative phrase or this is a subjunctive phrase. Focus on the concept itself of knowns being indicativo and unknowns and negatives being subjuntivo. It takes a little time and practice and repetition, but over time you realize that we kind of express ourselves in the same ways over and over again. And after you've seen so many examples, there aren't a lot of new examples. It's just the same structures being used over and over. And finally, in wrapping up, amigos, un pensamiento profundo. Busco a alguien que me entienda para que luego me explique. Notice our uses of subjuntivo there, entienda from entender and explique from explicar. Can you justify to yourself why the subjuntivo is used in both of those situations? Well, for the first part of the sentence, I am looking for someone that understands me. I'm looking for this person. Don't know for sure if I'll find that individual or not. That's definitely an unknown, ¿verdad? And then the second part, para que luego me explique. Oh, para que is creeping back in from the lesson on subjunctive with conjunctions. Para que, well, we love para que. We have a party when we see it because it's a given. It's an always for the subjuntivo. Para que luego me explique. So that then he he can explain me, ¿verdad? I'm looking for someone that understands me so that later he can explain me, as in explain me to myself, ¿verdad? Sometimes we all need a little explaining of ourselves, ¿verdad? Bueno, muchas gracias, buen trabajo y hasta la próxima. Chao.